You thought you'd be launching jets, navigating warships, or saving lives. Think again. Because for thousands of sailors, Navy life looks more like scrubbing toilets, sweeping floors, and filing paperwork. And the worst part? You can spend your entire enlistment doing just that. Welcome to the side of the Navy they never show in the commercials. You probably think that getting kicked out of the Navy takes something major: fighting, drugs, going AWOL. But the truth is far more unsettling. A sailor can lose everything for something as simple as showing up late too many times, failing a PT test, or even just rubbing the wrong person the wrong way. It's one of the biggest secrets the Navy doesn't advertise. You can get discharged, and fast, without any public courtroom drama or second chances. Most civilians have never even heard of it, but it's called administrative separation, or ADSEP, and it happens more than you'd expect. ADSEP is quiet, fast, and cold. You won't see it play out in dramatic courtrooms like you might imagine. Instead, the chain of command decides that a sailor is no longer fit for service, fills out a few forms, and starts a process that ends careers. And it doesn't have to be for anything criminal. A sailor might have served faithfully for years, deployed multiple times, and followed every order, but if leadership wants them out, they're out. Some get separated for minor mistakes, like falling asleep on watch, showing up out of uniform, or even posting the wrong thing on social media. One error in the wrong command can erase years of sacrifice. The scary part is how subjective it all can be. Your future can depend entirely on who your superior is, how much they like you, or what kind of mood they're in that week. It sounds harsh, but it's real. There are commands where one person in power decides they don't see you progressing, and that's all it takes to start paperwork that ends your service. Even worse, some commands use ADSEP as a way to deal with sailors they find inconvenient, rather than trying to mentor, train, or support them. It gets even more disturbing when you realize what this means for a sailor's future. When someone is administratively separated, they don't always get an honorable discharge. Many walk away with a general under honorable conditions discharge. That may sound decent to a civilian employer, but within the military world, that status carries weight. It can limit access to VA benefits, complicate future military reenlistment, and cast a shadow over everything you've worked for. It's not something most recruiters mention when you're signing your contract. Take Petty Officer James, for example. He served for years without major issues. He deployed twice, worked hard, and had no criminal activity. But during a particularly grueling deployment, he missed a scheduled duty shift. He was sleep-deprived, confused about the time, and dealing with personal stress back home. It wasn't a pattern, it was one mistake. His command didn't offer counseling or a formal punishment. Instead, they labeled him a problem and initiated separation. No court-martial, no hearing, just paperwork. He was gone in weeks. Just like that, his military career ended not with a bang, but with a signature. And it doesn't stop there. Sailors are also at risk because of their annual performance evaluations. Every year, enlisted sailors and officers receive what's known as a fit rep or eval. These evaluations can make or break a career. One slightly negative line, something as vague as requires additional supervision or needs improvement in teamwork, can sink your chances for advancement. The worst part? Many sailors don't even see the red flags coming. They don't find out how bad the eval is until after it's submitted. And once it's in your record, it's nearly impossible to fix. But maybe the most heartbreaking part of all this is how mental health plays into it. The Navy talks a big game about supporting mental wellness. You'll see posters, videos, and base-wide campaigns encouraging sailors to ask for help. But behind closed doors, things aren't always as supportive. If you go to medical and admit you're struggling, that visit could lead to a recommendation for separation. Not because you're dangerous, but because commands sometimes view mental health diagnoses as a liability. Sailors have watched others lose their careers after seeking counseling for anxiety, depression, or PTSD. So they stay silent, hiding their pain just to protect their future. That's the dirty truth. For all its structure and discipline, the Navy can be quick to discard its own. One mistake, one report, One commander's opinion can bring everything to a halt. And the outside world will never hear your side of the story. Your name goes on a list, your discharge papers get filed, and the Navy moves on like you were never there. They don't talk about that at boot camp. They don't show it in the commercials. But it's real. And thousands of sailors have lived through it. Some leave angry. Some leave broken. And some never fully recover from how fast it all ended. Coming up next, how toxic leadership isn't just a myth, it's one of the most dangerous things inside the Navy. And for many sailors, it's the reason everything falls apart. Toxic leadership is one of the Navy's most dangerous open secrets. It's not just a matter of bad bosses, it's about how entire commands can be built around fear, favoritism, and ego. While the Navy emphasizes values like honor, courage, and commitment, the reality in many commands is far from ideal. Leadership isn't always earned, and the consequences of bad leadership can destroy morale, ruin careers, and even put lives at risk. It starts early. Junior sailors quickly learn that the chain of command isn't always a support system, it can become a pressure cooker. Some leaders inspire and guide their sailors. Others lead with threats, public humiliation, and zero tolerance for human error. In those environments, sailors stop asking questions. They stop learning. They start surviving. There's a saying you'll hear on ships and in barracks: your command makes or breaks your Navy experience. And it's true. A sailor can be stationed in paradise, but be miserable under a tyrant. Or they could be posted in a terrible location, but thrive with strong leadership. The difference is night and day. But when you're stuck under someone who rules through intimidation or personal bias, it doesn't matter how hard you work, it may never be enough. The problem is layered. Some toxic leaders are born from the system itself. In many cases, the Navy promotes people based on time in service, test scores, or who they know, not always on emotional intelligence or people skills. A sailor might be great at fixing engines or navigating a ship, but that doesn't mean they know how to lead humans. But once they wear the khakis, they're given power. And power, in the wrong hands, becomes poison. One of the most common forms of abuse is public embarrassment. Sailors are dressed down in front of peers for minor mistakes. Leaders scream instead of mentor. Emails are sent to entire divisions calling out individuals by name. This isn't tough love, it's humiliation. And it creates a culture where everyone walks on eggshells. Favoritism is another insidious issue. Some sailors get away with everything, while others are punished for doing the same thing. If you're in the in crowd, you might get better shifts, more liberty, and more lenient evaluations. If you're not, even a small error could lead to a counseling chit or worse. Promotions, awards, and re-enlistment incentives are often handed out based on who you know, not what you've done. That imbalance builds resentment and kills teamwork. Then there's retaliation. This is where it turns from bad to dangerous. Sailors who speak up, who report issues, question decisions, or challenge unfair treatment, often become targets. Leadership might deny it, but it happens all the time. Suddenly, that sailor finds themselves written up more frequently, assigned the worst tasks, or even labeled a troublemaker during evaluations. It's a silent war that pushes many to either fall in line or get out. Worse still, the Navy's own reporting system often fails to protect those who come forward. Complaints about toxic leadership are supposed to go through equal opportunity, EO, offices or Inspector General, IG channels. But those systems can be slow, lack follow-through, or even loop back to the very people being reported. Sailors see this happen and make a hard choice: suffer quietly or risk everything by speaking up. Most choose silence. Mental health takes the biggest hit. Working under constant stress, fear, or verbal abuse chips away at a sailor's well-being. Many report insomnia, depression, or even suicidal thoughts, but they keep showing up because they don't want to be labeled weak. And once again, asking for help could risk their career. It's a vicious cycle. Let's not forget that toxic leadership doesn't just harm junior sailors, it poisons entire teams. Work slows down. Trust evaporates. Communication becomes minimal because everyone is afraid to say the wrong thing. People stop caring. Corners get cut. Mistakes pile up. And in a place like the Navy, where lives and millions of dollars of equipment are at stake, that can be deadly. It's not all doom and gloom. There are still great leaders in the Navy. The kind who build up their teams, lead from the front, and protect their people. But here's the truth the Navy doesn't advertise. If you end up under the wrong command, it can wreck your mental health, kill your career, and leave you with permanent scars. Sailors know this, but outsiders rarely see it. It doesn't show up in recruitment videos or glossy social media posts. But talk to enough people who've served, and you'll start to hear the same phrase over and over. I love the Navy, just not the people I worked for. Some survive it. Others get out early. And a few, too many, break down completely. Not from combat. Not from war. But from leadership that cared more about control than people. When people think about serving in the Navy, the first image that comes to mind is usually something intense: combat, danger, action on the open sea. Hollywood reinforces this all the time: warships launching missiles, SEALs storming enemy territory, and sailors fighting off pirates or engaging in battle. But here's a truth that surprises a lot of people, especially new recruits. Most Navy deployments have nothing to do with combat at all. They're long, repetitive, and often painfully boring. That's not to say they're easy, far from it. Deployments take a serious toll on sailors, just not in the ways most outsiders would expect. While you're not dodging bullets every day, you're still dealing with physical exhaustion, mental fatigue, and an endless grind that feels like it will never end. And no one prepares you for that part. Let's start with what a deployment actually looks like for the average sailor. You're stuck on a ship or stationed at a foreign base, sometimes for 6 months or more. Your schedule is locked in. You sleep in cramped berthing spaces, wake up before the sun, and follow a rigid routine. You stand watches, perform drills, clean, and repeat. Day after day, the same tasks. No days off. No weekends. No escape. For many sailors, the hardest part isn't the work, it's the monotony. Time moves differently on deployment. There's no real sense of day or night. You work on a rotating schedule. Sometimes you're on the midnight shift for weeks. Other times, your sleep is interrupted by unexpected general quarters or system alarms. Your body loses its natural rhythm. Sleep becomes a luxury, not a right. And then there's the distance. You're thousands of miles from home. If something goes wrong with your family, an illness, a death, a breakup, you don't get to be there. You might not even find out until days later, depending on the communication situation. Some sailors miss the birth of their children. Others miss funerals of loved ones. And when you're on a carrier or in a combat zone, there's no stepping off for a break. You're there until your rotation is over. Period. This constant separation leads to one of the biggest stressors in Navy life. Relationships fall apart. It's common. Sailors joke about getting a Dear John letter or email halfway through deployment. And those jokes aren't just dark humor, they're based on reality. The strain of long distance, lack of communication, and emotional detachment wears people down. A lot of marriages don't survive. A lot of sailors come home to empty apartments and divorce papers. Still, despite the emotional toll, sailors keep working. That's the expectation. You're trained to keep moving forward, no matter what's happening in your personal life. So even if your world is falling apart, you still report for duty. You still stand watch. You still paint, drill, sweep, and salute. And here's something else people don't realize. Most of what happens on deployment isn't glorious. There's no music playing. There's no epic purpose. You could spend days just monitoring a radar screen or performing equipment checks. You clean the same spaces. You fix the same broken valves. You follow endless checklists. There are drills for fires, drills for flooding, drills for casualties. And they never stop. You're always practicing for a disaster that may never come. It's mentally exhausting, and after a while, it starts to feel pointless. But that's the trick. The danger isn't in the action, it's in the lack of it. Sailors get complacent. People cut corners. Accidents happen. Ships catch fire, equipment fails, and people get hurt. And when that happens, commands often scramble to point fingers instead of fixing root problems. Meanwhile, the sailors, those just trying to do their job, pay the price. Even worse, the grind of deployment doesn't always get acknowledged. Civilians back home might say, "At least you weren't in combat." What they don't understand is that trauma comes in many forms. Being isolated, overworked, and emotionally shut down for months on end is its own kind of battle. And unlike combat, there's no medal for surviving it. A sailor can come home from deployment completely drained, mentally, physically, spiritually, and still be expected to bounce right back. There's no built-in decompression. You dock, offload, maybe get a few days of liberty, and then it's back to inspections, maintenance, and prep for the next one. No one says, "Take your time." They just say, "Hurry up." So no, most Navy deployments don't look like a war movie. But that doesn't mean they aren't hard. In fact, that's what makes them so dangerous. It's not the bullets you hear, it's the silence that wears you down. The invisible weight of duty. The repetition that chips away at you day by day. And that's one of the biggest secrets the Navy doesn't talk about. Combat might be rare. But burnout? That's everywhere. Up next in Part 4, how promotions in the Navy aren't always based on merit, and what really decides who moves up and who gets left behind. When most people think of military rank, they picture a clear, fair path upward: work hard, follow orders, be competent, and you'll get promoted. That's the dream. But in the Navy, the reality is often very different. Promotions are supposed to be based on performance, experience, and qualifications. In practice, they're often influenced by politics, timing, and personal connections. It's one of the most frustrating truths for enlisted sailors and junior officers alike. The best don't always rise, and the worst don't always fall. Let's start with enlisted advancement. On paper, the Navy uses a points-based system to determine who makes rank. You take a written exam, get credit for time in service, awards, evaluations, and professional military education. It looks objective. But the biggest factor by far is your evaluation report, or eval. And that's where things get complicated. Evals are written by your chain of command. That means your division officer or chief decides, in just a few bullet points, how competitive you'll be when the Navy looks at your record. If they like you, they'll rate you early promote or must promote. If they don't, or if they're playing favorites, you'll get a lower mark, and your chances of advancing plummet. That's how politics creeps in. One biased evaluation can delay a promotion for years, even if your exam scores are top tier. It's even worse for sailors in competitive ratings like aviation, intelligence, or nuclear fields, where advancement quotas are tight. You could be outstanding, but if only 5% are getting promoted in your job that cycle, and your command has favorites, you might be stuck waiting behind someone who doesn't do half the work you do. It becomes a game of positioning, not just performance. Then there's the issue of timing. Advancement opportunities vary from cycle to cycle based on how many sailors the Navy needs at each rank. One year, it might be wide open. The next, completely locked down. Sailors who test in a bad year might get stuck in rank for several cycles, not because they aren't qualified, but because the system simply didn't have room. By the time the next cycle comes around, someone else might leapfrog them. And all of this assumes the sailor is even allowed to test. Some get held back for reasons as minor as paperwork delays, missed qualifications, or ongoing investigations, even if they're innocent. Others don't get recommended to advance at all because their chain of command wants to send a message. It's supposed to be a fair system, but so much depends on personalities and timing that the playing field is far from even. It's no different for officers. Junior officers rise in rank based on a combination of fitness reports, fit reps, board selections, and command endorsements. Again, on paper, it sounds merit-based. But in practice, networking and relationships matter just as much, if not more, than actual performance. Officers who know the right people, who go to the right schools, or who serve under high-profile commands get attention. Those who don't? They fade into the background. There are even unofficial golden career paths for officers, certain tours or duty stations that, if completed, all but guarantee promotion. But not everyone gets offered those positions. Many talented officers get stuck in undesirable roles or ships because their detailer didn't advocate for them, or because their previous command gave them a lukewarm fitrep. It has little to do with ability and everything to do with visibility and timing. This unspoken game wears people down. Sailors see underperformers advance while top-tier workers get passed over. They see friends get better evaluations because they were more likable or spent more time socializing with leadership. And slowly, the message becomes clear. Working hard is good, but working smart, politically smart, is often better. That realization creates a toxic atmosphere. Sailors who care deeply about the mission begin to question the value of effort. Some start to play the game, volunteering for visible tasks over meaningful ones, speaking up only when leadership is nearby, or focusing more on appearances than substance. Others give up entirely. They do the bare minimum, knowing that no matter what they do, someone else is always going to get the nod. It's not just frustrating, it's dangerous. In an organization that thrives on trust, favoritism and flawed advancement erode morale. Good sailors leave. Bad ones stay. And over time, the culture suffers. The Navy ends up with leaders who look great on paper, but may not be the ones you'd want beside you in a real crisis. To be fair, there are leaders and commands that do it right. They reward true performance. They advocate for the right people. But many sailors never experience that. They serve under biased leadership, in commands that play favorites, during cycles where no one's getting promoted anyway. And so, year after year, they wait, watching others rise while wondering if their own effort means anything at all. That's a truth the Navy won't tell you during recruitment. They'll say, you get out what you put in. But behind the curtain, what you get out often depends on who's watching and whether they like what they see. Next in Part 5, the Navy's medical system, why getting help can be one of the riskiest moves a sailor makes. There's an unspoken fear in the Navy that keeps sailors quiet, even when they're suffering. It's the fear of going to medical. The fear that admitting you're in pain, physically or mentally, might cost you everything. And sadly, that fear isn't unfounded. While the Navy says it encourages sailors to seek help, the actual system in place often punishes those who do. That's the secret they don't talk about. The military medical system is broken and, sometimes, going to medical is the riskiest move a sailor can make. On paper, the Navy offers free healthcare, access to military treatment facilities, MTFs, and referrals to specialists. That sounds like a dream to most civilians. No premiums, no bills, no insurance bureaucracy. But the experience sailors face is often the opposite. Clinics are overbooked. Wait times can stretch for weeks. And even when you do get seen, there's no guarantee the provider will take your issues seriously. Too many sailors walk into medical with real pain, bad knees, constant headaches, back issues from hard labor, and walk out with nothing but Motrin and a heat pack. It's become a running joke. No matter what's wrong, the answer is 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, drink more water, and rest. The problem is, that joke isn't funny when you're the one limping to work every day, still expected to perform at full speed. Then there's the paperwork. Every visit gets documented. And in the Navy, documentation can follow you and haunt you. If you go to medical for something serious, it can trigger what's known as a LIMDU, limited duty, status. That might sound helpful at first, temporary relief from full physical duties, but once you're flagged, you're on the radar. And for many commands, that flag is a red mark. You're now non-deployable. You might be left behind. You might get pulled from a promotion board. Some sailors even find themselves being quietly processed for separation. Mental health is where this fear multiplies. The Navy tells you to speak up, to break the stigma. They post signs in every workspace urging sailors to reach out if they're struggling. But those same signs don't mention what can happen after you do. If a sailor tells a provider they're feeling depressed, anxious, or even just overwhelmed, that conversation can lead to a fitness for duty review. In some cases, It ends in a diagnosis that gets added to their permanent record, and just like that, their chain of command starts treating them differently. Some commands support sailors who ask for help. Others isolate them, question their judgment, or stop trusting them with responsibility. Sailors who were once trusted with critical tasks suddenly find themselves assigned cleaning duty or removed from leadership roles. Not because they did something wrong, but because they were honest about what they were going through. The Navy says they want resilience. What they reward is silence. And silence, in this case, becomes deadly. Suicides in the Navy have been rising in recent years. Some cases happen on ships. Others happen in barracks, sometimes just days after a sailor asked for help. Many of those sailors had been brushed off, passed from one clinic to another, or discouraged from going to mental health altogether. Their commands told them to tough it out. The system told them to wait. And they ran out of time. There's also the issue of medical discharge. Sailors who suffer serious injuries or chronic conditions may be medically separated even if they don't want to leave. The process is slow, confusing, and often feels unfair. Some sailors spend months in limbo, not knowing if they'll stay in or be forced out. Others get discharged with vague diagnoses, limiting their access to VA benefits later. And very few are given a chance to appeal or explain their side of the story. It creates a dangerous paradox. You're told to be strong. But if you push too hard and break something, the system might abandon you. You're told to be honest. But if you admit you're struggling, your career could be over. So sailors keep it in. They self-medicate. They ignore the pain. They carry the burden quietly until it becomes too heavy to hide. The truth is, the Navy's medical system is designed to treat readiness, not the person. It's not about healing you. It's about whether you're fit to serve. If you are, you're pushed back into the fight. If you're not, you're processed out. Somewhere along the way, the humanity gets lost. Most civilians will never hear about this side of military life. They assume sailors are well cared for, supported, and treated with dignity. And in some cases, that's true. But for countless others, the act of walking into a medical office becomes the beginning of the end. Coming up in Part 6, why many Navy jobs have nothing to do with combat, tactics, or leadership, and how the reality of daily work often feels like a glorified janitorial service. When people think of joining the Navy, they imagine intensity. They think of sleek warships cutting through the ocean, high-stakes missions, and elite training. They picture sailors launching jets from carriers, decoding secret intelligence, or diving deep beneath the sea. But here's the reality the brochures don't show. Most Navy jobs are nowhere near that exciting. In fact, a surprising number of sailors spend their days doing tasks that feel far more like office work, janitorial labor, or warehouse management than anything remotely military. Every branch of the military needs support, but in the Navy, that support system is massive and most sailors are part of it. For every sailor working in high-tech warfare or classified intelligence, there are dozens more handling admin, doing maintenance, standing watch, or performing mind-numbing cleaning tasks. It's not glamorous. It's not tactical. And it's definitely not what most people expect when they raise their right hand and swear to serve. Take a brand new sailor, for example. They graduate boot camp thinking they're about to learn a technical skill or travel the world. But instead, they report to their first command and spend months sweeping passageways, scrubbing toilets, or standing 12-hour watches at a locked door. It's called in-dock work, the rite of passage that often feels more like punishment than training. And for some unlucky sailors, that phase never really ends. Even sailors with specific job ratings like aviation bosun's mate or machinist's mate can find themselves spending half their time doing collateral duties or repetitive cleaning. Entire workdays can revolve around maintaining zone inspection readiness, which means cleaning every visible surface with obsessive detail so an officer can walk through and declare the space shipshape. If there's even one smudge, the whole team stays late. Then there's the relentless watch standing. Sailors stand guard on equipment, doors, and passageways around the clock. On ships, that means rotating 4 to 6 hour shifts, even overnight, whether you're in port or underway. Imagine being jolted awake at 2 a.m. to stand in a narrow hallway watching a locked room for 4 hours and then reporting for a full day of work afterward. That's the norm. Many Navy jobs also include an enormous amount of paperwork. Admin ratings, logistics specialists, personnel clerks. They're buried in forms, databases, and deadlines. They manage records, ship out parts, process leave requests, or input pay adjustments. It's critical work, no doubt. But it's the kind of work that, outside the uniform, would feel like any other civilian desk job. The difference? There's more bureaucracy, more micromanagement, and far fewer thank yous. Even medical and dental assistants in the Navy, who work in clinics and hospitals, often find themselves doing hours of data entry or inventory counting. It's not uncommon to join expecting to assist with surgeries or trauma cases, only to end up organizing supplies and updating spreadsheets. Some sailors are assigned to mess duty, washing dishes, or preparing food in the galley, even when it has nothing to do with their assigned rating. It's just part of paying your dues. Sailors are often told, everyone's job is important, and in theory, that's true. But after months or years of doing the same low-impact tasks, many start to question the meaning of their service. They joined for a sense of purpose, maybe adventure. Instead, they feel like glorified janitors, secretaries, or human alarms. And they're not allowed to complain, because complaining gets labeled as a bad attitude. Bad attitudes don't get good evals. And bad evals kill careers. The monotony becomes its own mental battle. Sailors talk about Groundhog Day syndrome, waking up, doing the same job, eating the same food, walking the same passageways, and going to sleep, only to do it all over again the next day. It can wear you down. Some learn to cope by finding pride in the small things. Others detach emotionally. A few spiral into frustration, knowing full well they could be doing more, if the system allowed it. There's also the disconnect between perception and reality. When sailors return home in uniform, family and friends assume they've been doing something heroic. They imagine danger, strategy, impact. But often, that sailor has spent the last 6 months tracking inventory, cleaning scuppers, or standing watch in a boiler room. They smile, nod, and accept the thanks because explaining the truth just feels awkward. None of this means that Navy life is meaningless. Every ship needs a crew. Every operation requires logistics. But the Navy doesn't tell new recruits that their role might not feel like the Navy at all. They don't say, you might spend most of your service doing tasks that civilians would never associate with military life. That's the unspoken part. The real Navy isn't always dangerous. It's repetitive, bureaucratic, and full of tasks that have nothing to do with combat or command. For many, it becomes a test of patience, discipline, and perspective. Some find meaning in the mission, even when the day-to-day feels small. Others leave disillusioned, wondering why no one told them the truth before they signed the contract. Navy